The Fed recently came out and stated that they were going to overshoot their 2% inflation target, and they were going to do this to make up for all the years that inflation ran below 2%. Well, have you ever wondered where this 2% target actually comes from and what it truly means? Well, the truth is, and this is just my opinion, that the real rate of inflation has ran much higher than 2% over the last number of decades. And in fact, in this video, I'm going to show you how the Fed has artificially lowered inflation rates for its own gain and at the expense of society's most vulnerable. All of this has a profound effect on the decisions we make every day to do with money. And it has drastic implications for us if we're not aware of the facts. By at least understanding the truth, you will be able to make informed decisions about what you spend your money on and what you should invest in. In this video, I'm going to share with you the truth about inflation, and I'm going to share what I'm going to be doing to try and stay ahead of this absolute disaster. This truly is an important message, so help me get it out there by liking the video. It only takes 1 second and it really helps me out. So with that being said, let's get into it. Common sense, which is sadly not so common, tells us that the rates of inflation the Fed issues don't reflect the actual cost increases that we've been experiencing, at least not in things that truly matter, like housing, healthcare and food. And I'm not talking about that mass-produced processed crap, but real food. I mean, just ask anybody who's significantly older than you are what they paid for their house, what their rent used to cost, or what basic food items used to cost them, and you will see that it just doesn't stack up. Some very basic calculations show us that the loss of purchasing power we're experiencing is not reflected in the inflation statistics released by the Fed. The reality is that our currency, be it the euro, the dollar or the yen, is losing purchasing power much faster than our governments would want us to believe. And the reality is that inflation is not averaging 2% per year, but in fact it's closer to 8% per year. It all just comes down to what you measure. For example, if I say that the average human is just 4.5 foot tall, but all I've done is measured 6-year-olds, then that's extremely misleading. In the exact same way, the Fed tells you that inflation is 2% or less, but they're choosing what they measure, and what they measure does not represent the true cost of living. Now, the difference between 2% and 8% might not sound like a lot, but if you're somebody that understands the power of compound interest, you'll know that a 6% differential is absolutely staggering and has profound implications on our lives. One example of something that the Fed doesn't measure is the cost of retirement. And this is actually one of the most important critical factors for quality of life. I mean, we all want to retire comfortably someday. This is one of the main reasons we work all our lives and pay diligently into a pension. Let me show you just how much the cost of retirement has changed over the last 10 years. Okay, so this table shows the average yield that an annuity would have netted you each year from 2010 to 2020. You can see in 2010, an annuity would have net you 3.33% interest per year, and in 2020, an annuity would net you 1.56% interest per year. So let's say you wanted to earn $50,000 in annual income per year during your retirement. Well, in 2010, you would have had to purchase an annuity for a total value of $1.5 million to generate your $50,000 in income per year at a rate of 3.33% yield. Fast forward to today, and if you want to earn that same $50,000 in yield, you will need to purchase an annuity for $3.2 million US. So straight off the bat, we can see that the cost of the annuity has doubled to give you the same yield. Now, if we calculate the inflation rate from 2010 to 2020 of the cost of this annuity, it works out at 8%. So roughly speaking, if something increases by 8% per year, it's going to double over 10 years. But you see, things aren't as simple as that, because while the cost of the annuity is increasing, the purchasing power of the $50,000 that it gives you per year is also decreasing. So in actual fact, while the annuity would have net you $50,000 in 2010, that same $50,000 is worth much less now than it was then. And taking an average inflation rate of 8%, we can actually see that in 2020, that same $50,000 is worth half of what it was worth in 2010. So, in actual fact, if you wanted to have the same purchasing power in 2020 as you would have had in 2010 during your retirement, you would actually need an annuity that would net you near to $100,000, not $50,000. And the cost of that annuity? $7.4 million US dollars for the same purchasing power is what you would have got for $1.5 million US dollars all the way back in 2010. So based on that, then what's the real rate of inflation of an annuity and the cost of retirement? Well, I've calculated here in column S, and you can see that there's huge variability within it. 71% minus 9%, 34%, 41% minus 18%. If we take an average of all of these, the average is 21%. So there you have it. The cost of retirement has increased at an inflation rate of 21% since 2010. Now, how have most people saved for retirement between 2010 and 2020? Well, they've invested in a basket of index funds, the most popular being the S&P 500. And that index fund has increased closer to 8% annually since 2010, meaning that it's roughly doubled. In comparison, the cost of the annuity has almost increased by a factor of 5. So this, my friends, is a big, big problem. So then, why is this lie so prevalent? Well, as with all lies, you either come clean with the truth or you keep digging yourself into a hole. And in this case, I believe the government has chosen the latter. And at this stage, the hole is dug so deep that the consequences of coming clean would be catastrophic for society. I mean, can you imagine if the government had to increase the rate of social security at a rate of 8% annually? If the public knew the true consequences of inflation and the true rates, then they would probably demand this, and the government wouldn't be able to do it. The system's already completely uneconomical, and the governments are all running a massive deficit. So how on earth would the government pay for this? More debt? Well, imagine the cost of servicing this debt if interest rates were in line with true inflation. I mean, who on earth would buy treasury bonds that yielded 2% if you're getting 8% inflation every year? Straight off the bat, you're losing 6% of your purchasing power every year. The truth is that governments can only sustain their massive debt because the cost of borrowing is so low. And their only hope now, because they're in such massive debt, is to simply inflate it away. The problem is only getting worse though, because while they are managing to hit high rates of inflation, they continuously keep taking out more debt. This is a textbook example of a vicious downward cycle. And in my opinion, it's likely to lead to some sort of catastrophic failure of the system, a monetary renegotiation, or worsening levels of inflation. So how is it that they actually fudge the numbers? Well, inflation is measured using something called the CPI index, the Consumer Price Index. And this is supposed to measure the price adjustment of standard consumer expenditures over the course of a year. This measure is critical to a functioning economy, so that accurate and fair decisions are made with regards wage increases, contract adjustments, social security payments, loan terms, and of course investment returns. So to make all these decisions, the CPI is widely regarded as the source of truth with regards to inflation. The perceived value of the CPI is that it takes into account the increases in cost of living and out-of-pocket expenses, such as non-essential and discretionary items. The truth is, however, that at one point in time the CPI did accurately measure the cost of living and price adjustments associated with it. However, now, in my opinion, it's completely void of any logical sense or reason. Originally, the CPI tracked the price adjustment of a fixed weight basket of goods and services. However, since the 1990s, this has been changed and bastardized so that it no longer reflects anything of real value. The changes implemented by the Fed which have done this are two things. One is called Hedonic quality adjustment and the other is called substitution. Let me show you real quickly how these work. Okay, so here you can see the CPI calculation spreadsheet. And what you can see down in this column here is lots of different categories, and there's huge amounts of them. And they represent a huge basket of goods and services, which are supposed to represent the cost of living. And as you can see, there's a huge amounts of variables within this spreadsheet. One interesting one is this relative importance factor, which you can see is given beside each category of expenditure. And ultimately what this means is how much does this category affect the overall CPI number. So something with a high factor here will have a bigger effect on the CPI as opposed to something with a lower factor. And I can imagine that this is to do with how much the average family consumes each one of these expenditure categories. But the problem, of course, with this is very subjective. And based on the numbers assigned to each category, you could quite easily dictate what the CPI value is coming out the other end. But two of the main ways that this sheet gets alterated is through hedonic quality adjustments and substitution. Hedonic quality adjustments take place when items become more expensive, but the quality also improves. So for instance, the cost of cars has increased over the last number of decades, but so too has the quality, the safety, more airbags, better sound, satellite navigation, better seats, more comfort, etc., etc. And what the Fed does in this instance is it negates the cost increase of the item on the factor that the quality is also improved. So a car now that might cost 50 grand would be given the same relative weighting in the CPI calculation as a car that would have cost 20,000. And this is a cop-out because you don't choose to pay for the quality adjustments that are given to you. You don't have a choice other than to buy the more expensive car with the improved safety to meet the current regulations and guidelines. Equally so, phones are more expensive now and the quality is much better and we get much more in our phones, but we also pay a lot more for them. And again, the Fed would use hedonic quality adjustments to negate the price increase and keep the CPI level stable. So this discrepancy between the actual price of goods and services and the declining or flat CPI for the same goods or services is the result of hedonic quality adjustments. The other way in which the CPI calculation is kept substantially lower than the real value for inflation is through something called substitution. So a very straightforward example would be this category here for uncooked beef steaks. If we went back 10 years ago, that category might have measured the price of a ribeye steak or a fillet steak, which would be the most expensive cuts of beef. But over the years, by using substitution, that category has been substituted for a cheaper alternative. And this is the same with all other categories. Substitution substitutes out more expensive alternatives for cheaper alternatives. And therefore this isn't measuring a fixed basket of goods and services, and it isn't accurately measuring the cost of maintaining a standard of life. Instead, it's measuring the bare minimum needed to meet each of the categories within the spreadsheet. If we go to a website called Shadowstatscom, the author has done a fantastic job in visualizing the true rate of inflation. And you can see here in red, he's depicted the CPI value that the Fed issues, and it's around 2 or 3% up to kind of 2010, where it's been trending then below 2%. And in blue then you can see the CPI value based on the 1980 calculation before hedonic quality adjustments and substitution were implemented. And you can see that this value trends much closer to 8% than the artificially lowered rate issued by the Fed. But again, even the alternative CPI issued by this author has its limitations, as the CPI has never, in my opinion, measured the true cost of maintaining a lifestyle and the true cost of the things that truly matter to us. If you're on a salary, it's highly likely that your salary is not increasing at a rate equal to inflation. Your only hope is that you can get promoted regularly enough that you can stay ahead of inflation. The problem with this though is that promotions generally come with more responsibility, longer hours and more stress. Therefore, just to maintain your lifestyle would require more and more work and more stress. This is a very poor trade-off in my opinion. The other downside to this is that even if you do manage to maintain your salary at a rate greater than inflation, the government is not going to adjust its lower tax bands in line with inflation, so you'll end up paying more and more tax. Therefore, while you earn more and more currency to try and offset the value loss of inflation, you will simply give more and more of that currency to the government in the form of taxes. The other major implication is that you cannot rely on Social Security for a comfortable retirement. While you pay a hefty contribution in the form of taxes your whole working life, what you'll get in the end as a reward will likely not be enough to maintain your lifestyle. You see, the government is profoundly inefficient at allocating capital, and it needs more and more money every year just to meet its commitments. It's festering with bureaucracy and waste that would never survive in the private sector, and this is why high inflation is needed. Because of the inefficiency of the government needs more and more debt to meet its commitments. This debt it cannot repay, so it needs to inflate away the value of it. Inflation is a hidden tax which takes money out of your pocket and puts it in the pocket of the government to cover up for its massive inefficiencies. Many people believe we live in a capitalist society, but the truth is, it's just crony capitalism. True capitalism, on the other hand, is deflationary by nature. Competition drives down prices, and technology improvements made possible by capitalism give us more value for less money. However, because we live in a crony capitalist society, the benefits of natural deflation are offset by central bank intervention. If true deflation was left to run its natural course, we'd all be working less hours and we'd be getting more value for our money. But because we live in a crony capitalist society where the government uses inflation as a hidden tax, we don't get the benefits of natural deflation. And instead we need to work more and more hours just to maintain our standard of living. So what can you do about all this? Well, I'm not a financial advisor, so I cannot give you financial advice. This channel is just about me documenting my investment journey and my attempt to stay ahead of inflation. What I will say though is that education, I think, is the best hedge against inflation. Educate yourself on the true nature of our society, of our economy, and on the various ways that you can allocate capital to try and stay ahead of inflation. The truth is that what might have worked for the last decade will not work for the next decade. And staying ahead of inflation is therefore a much more nuanced subject than a lot of people would have you believe. What it all boils down to though is getting your money out of fiat currency and into true inflation hedges. Some examples are technology companies, real estate, precious metals, and my favourite, which is Bitcoin. But ultimately it's up to you to educate yourself and make your own decisions, because nobody's going to hold your hand and drag you along with them. It's up to you to secure your future, not anybody else. The other thing that I'm not afraid of is cheap debt. Mortgage rates are historically very cheap at the moment, meaning you can purchase real assets which go up in price over time using borrowed currency that's going to decrease in value over time. This simply means that if you have a loan and an asset, then the value of the loan goes down because the currency is devaluating, while the value of the asset goes up. And this differential is where you make money. Right now, I think this is a great trade. The most important thing though is that you take your future into your own hands and don't plan on relying on social welfare when you get older. Learn to be a great capital allocator and stay ahead of the hidden tax that is inflation. If you found this video helpful, or if the whole topic of inflation annoys you as much as it annoys me, then please support the video, smash the like button and help me get the word out there. Let me know down in the comments below some of your favourite inflation hedges and what you're doing to protect your purchasing power. As always, thank you so much for watching. Have a lovely day and I'll see you in the next one.